Hello, everyone. Dr. Allen here. Hope you are having a great week. I'm going to go ahead and jump right in. We're getting close to the end. As always, thank you all for the quality of work, turning everything in. I'm fairly caught up. I think I'm got to get the discussion fours posted. The Wakelets were great. I think I said on the last video I was going to have those graded or should have them up soon. That was a great collection. I liked what everyone had. A lot of resources that I actually kind of made note of for myself in the future. So what we're going to do this week, I don't have the syllabus pulled up, but I'll do that at the end. But I will go ahead and cover, say, what this week is. This week we're going to talk about the future of education and, well, more, I'm saying education, but more like in curriculum, planning, instruction, things like that, which is education, obviously. And also, I'm going to go over the paper. I know some people have already emailed me about the paper and they have ideas and probably have already started working on them. That is the assignment this week. And actually, I have that spilling over slightly into our final week, so you have a little more time. I'm going to have it due. It's going to be a little bit weird. I think it's due. Actually, I know it's due on the 22nd. That way, if you need another weekend, you can get it in. So to speak. And there is something on the syllabus called a TCDA. You've probably done this if you've had some other classes in the education department at Shepherd. We have that the final week. And there's actually a little, I'm going to count it as a little extra credit exercise. It's very, very small that we're going to do the final week, but I want to make sure we're all on the same page that final week and wrap up. But I'm putting the cart before the horse. We've got to get through this week. So this week is paper, 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 and of course the future of education, which may influence what paper topic you pick. Um, I'm not going to spend too much time on the PowerPoint. I'm going to highlight a few things, mainly because I kind of, hopefully I'm not going to babble too much. I got a little reflective this week because um, as I was looking at the future of education, and I always do a little bit of reflecting on what I would do, especially this is the first time I've taught this class, what I would do differently, what I would do again, things like that. And sometimes, I was thinking because I really was trying to do some new things with technology, whether it was incorporating a little more AI, which I'm going to talk about in this. It's actually on the PowerPoint, and actually there's some articles that talk about it that I have posted, even if it's using technology in terms of Padlet and Wakelet and things like that. I like that stuff. But again, it all comes back to, we're going to look at some old predictions for the future of education, and technology is always there. And I guess it comes back to that concept of technology is a tool. It shouldn't be the content or what is actually going on in the class. It's a tool. And, I have to watch myself because you don't want everything to be about the stress of using technology. Again, old argument, nothing new in that concept, but that was something I was thinking about with this. Again, I like technology, but anyway, I digress. So we're going to look briefly here. Again, I'll try to keep this not too long in terms of where, what the future, there's our guiding question. I'm going to move my face of curriculum, practice, and design, and things like that. I know this looks a little weird. If you're wondering why there's a unicorn, that was a GIF. I loaded it up as a PDF face palm. So you're not seeing the GIF, but it's supposed to flash the future, the future. So I'm going to do that for you. The future, the future. Um, and, just to kind of give some context, we've briefly talked about this and other things, and I'm sure you've gotten this if you're in your educational foundations, either as an undergrad or as a graduate student. But a lot of times you can summarize education in the United States, at least in the three big eras. I think there you could even make a case there's the Cold War era kind of falls in here. But you could say the industrial age, of course, that's that period of factories. Students weren't always required to go to school. Maybe they only had to go to eighth grade, things like that. It focused on basic skill sets. There was the progressive era, that's the Dewey era. A lot of the stuff that we talk about in educational foundation classes today are rooted in that. I think I mentioned this gentleman. If I didn't, he's someone that in social studies gets mentioned a good bit, Harold Rugg. He was a professor at Columbia University. He's kind of considered the godfather of social studies and the idea of kind of getting those contents organized into one. I'm summarizing that a little bit, but he taught at Columbia University, and he's another one for that progressive era. But Dewey is the guy who really comes out of that period. And again, that's that experimental learning, kind of learning through experience, get outside, see what's going on. It's something we still champion today. I guess the easiest way to say it, it's that student-centered practice. And of course, I think, today we're kind of in that digital age, that idea of trying to personalize education. Everyone's got a Chromebook, everyone's got a MacBook. Let's do technology. And I guess that gets into what I was talking about, the idea of technology. I'm going to throw out someone's name because when I was reflecting, I was thinking about when I was in graduate school in the 90s, late 90s, I'll add. But there was an educational, he wasn't a teacher, but he was someone who worked in the field and liked to look at education as a window into things. His name was Neil Postman. I want to actually show some stuff on that before we finish, just to kind of uh, just talk about the idea of technology, because he passed away. It's been over 20 years. So I read a book of his in the 90s called The End of Education, and a lot of it dealt with technology. The technology he was really focused on was television. He passed away right when the internet was starting to get a foothold in the early 2000s. He was around in the late 90s, but the concepts of what he's seeing now would probably blow his mind in terms of YouTube and stuff like that. But still, I think he has some cool stuff, and I want to actually share some of his quotes. And of course, if you look here, this is actually in that, I'd say, later progressive era, if you were wondering. I kind of liked it because this was during World War II, and you could get ration books, and there's a ration book. So anyway, again, another gift that's not gifting, I guess. But, today, I think there's a lot of things that when we're thinking about designing curriculum, there's a big push for interdisciplinary learning. I don't think that's anything new. It's something that I do stress that all teachers should do. As a social studies teacher, I always like to tell my methodology classes, your language arts teacher can be your best friend. I remember doing a unit when I taught social studies, we would talk about the Russian Revolution, and of course the students would read Animal Farm. It's pretty simple to put together, but we could expand out. That's just an example. That idea that I like the word silos, so I did put silos in there. We're not, I always tell my students, when you grow up, you're not going to be I'm in the math portion of my day, I'm in the English portion of the day. Life doesn't work like that. It all connects. Whether it's, again, in social studies, we would do math calculations on percentages on election results, stuff like that. And I'm sure you all do that in your all's classrooms. It's not just about your content area or what content area you're teaching. I'm not going to get bogged down on this because I've said this a bazillion times this semester, probably too much. But AI is coming; it's getting a foothold, and it's something that you need to integrate. Something I've been trying to work on in this class to various levels of success, I think. But I am trying to get used to using it. I have a quote. I'll show it at the end. I don't know if anyone saw it in the news. Bill Gates was actually talking about AI in education, and he had something, I don't want to say it was disturbing, but it was an interesting thought. It was about education in the medical field. I'll save that till after we finish. And of course, there's also that whole idea of having, the competency-based models, that idea of mastering something instead of seat time, like just covering it. Make sure you know it. And I think that's a very good trend. Sometimes I think we rush through stuff just to say we covered it instead of making sure students know it. I think all fields of education do that, not just K to 12. I think universities do that. I think we just do it in basic work settings too. But these are three trends that are emerging. And again, there's other things that come into, there's always that push for experimental learning. That's that old Dewey concept way back into the 1910s, 1920s. Adapting digital platforms, getting technology. And I think schools really do try to do that. But again, it's the idea of there's that too much of a good thing. And of course, the global collaboration, the idea of, we're sharing, networks, frameworks, communication. I mean, you could have a class and have a speaker from China in your class just based on Zoom, which is pretty cool. So there's ways to do that. So anyway, and also, change. Again, what are some of the challenges that we're going to face in the future? These are all nice. Resources is always a battle. It's been a battle since the beginning of public schools and schools in general. The idea of having a standardized curriculum and allowing teachers to have some flexibility in the classroom, always, again, I don't think what is old is new again. I think that falls into this. I think this is maybe in some regards the biggest one is the rapid change. Things are happening so fast in all fields, including education, and keeping up with it. Societal changes, viewpoints, um, technology changes. I think some of that comes back to this because we're such a smaller world, so to speak, now. So, just keeping up with the changes, that's a big challenge. I'm not going to get too much into that. There's, if I'm thinking AI, why not vision? I do watch a lot of MCU with my son and my wife. We're watching Daredevil right now, as I probably watched it, I think, last night before I filmed this. But anyway, again, there are things that might be able to help. There's AI assisted design. That's something, again, if you've had ed tech or even in your schools, there's a lot of training and things that are going on with that. uh, Integrated learning ecosystems, that idea of creating networks where we have cross-curricular type of things. Again, develop curriculum. You can have co-creation models working with other groups, community members, things like that. These are ideal things. I think these are not, again, I don't think these are new ideas, but I think there's things that are just gaining, they've kind of made the circle back around. AI, I guess, is new, but it still falls in the technology. But these are things that I think for the future we still got to focus on. I'm going to post them up. I'm sure you've probably seen them, but there was something called the 21st Century Skill Set. Our technology class still looks at them. They are, I don't want to say they're funny. They're just, they were skills that all students should have in the 21st century. And to me, they just look like skills that, I got in the 80s when I was in school and then late in the 90s. So anyway, I'm going to go ahead and jump off of here. And then if you go down here, I have a few things. What is my untitled thing there? Oh, there it is. This is the notes. I was just making sure I need to put a title there. Didn't forget anything. I did put a few things under something entitled The Future. This was an article from 10 years ago. I believe it is on Edutopia. Let me make sure that it's popping up slowly. There it is. It was The Future of Learning. Um, this was a 1960s cartoon. It's kind of funny sometimes to see what schools make. But if you look, flexible learning. I mean, actually, I say 10 years ago. I think is it 10 years ago? Was it 2000? Oh, it's over 10 years ago. Flexible learning, customized learning, personalized learning, invisible technology. Um, Feedback. That's same things. What is old is new again. I also put some reports up here about if you're interested in this, like where some of our gaps are, a UNESCO report, or where education needs to go from here. And again, I won't read the article to you, but there are a lot of different things on here to look at. There was something by 2030 we look at, and let me post this up slowly, 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 slowly. There it goes. And as you can see, there's another one, key shapes. Sorry for the pop-ups. And then you see technology, VR. It's funny, I put it on here. VR is something that I think is still in schools. I've seen some schools that actually have bought the glasses. It almost seems like AI like jumped the line. I was thinking about this like with Blu-ray. There was like tapes, DVDs. Blu-ray came for like a year or two, and then all of a sudden streaming came. I know sometimes wonder, I guess VR is still has a very important role, but it seems like AI is now all of a sudden overshadowing a lot of the VR stuff I've seen in schools, um, in terms of utilization and stuff like that, and hybrid models. But there's, again, if you want to check these out, they are posted. Um, they may help you if you're thinking about this in terms of your paper. I also put this up. Bill Gates, it wouldn't embed, so I'll just click the link. He did an interview, as you can see, it was actually in late March, and he was predicting within 10 years AI will replace many doctors and teachers. Humans won't be needed. I don't know if I totally agree with that. That kind of, if you remember that 60s article, well, that 2014 article I had a 1960s cartoon on there. They had a robot teaching the class. Now, obviously, we haven't gotten to that. That's very Jetsons-like concept. But Bill Gates, if you want to check it out, he did talk about where he thinks AI might come into education and why the role of an educator may change. So, um, anyway, that's there. I won't read it all to you, but it's there to check out if you want to. And finally, in terms of the content this week, if you want to check all this out, I did post up something from Neil Postman. I had mentioned him. He was, I don't know how to describe. I guess he was a modern philosopher. He, like I said, he looked at different things, but he kind of did it through almost the lens of technology and how he thought it was affecting different um, trades, schools, U.S. society, and he always kind of ended up coming back to education. He wrote a book. I actually dug mine up in 1995 called "The End of Education," and I kind of, when I was thinking about this unit that we're looking at, where Postman, what were some of his thoughts? I have to admit, I didn't reread the whole book. I did read parts of it again just to kind of see the chapters that I thought might relate. I put an interview up here, or actually, it was a speech that he did in 1998. He passed away in 2003. And he talks about the new narratives of public education. It's very interesting. Let me see if I can. I don't know why my thing is kind of jammed up here. Let me see. Yeah, my computer's a little, it's fighting some stuff here. Let me hit this. There it goes. Yeah, I was going to say it's about 10 minutes long. The reason I just wanted to see the time. It's interesting. It looks like it was filmed in the 90s, so I'll warn you. But some of the ideas that he pulls up are actually they're interesting. He refers to gods. It's not a religious thing. He's talking about, like, he's calling different areas like the god of, like almost think of a Greek god type thing or an Egyptian god. And actually, let me pull these quotes up. I just wanted to make note of him because I think he was kind of maybe it was me being a graduate student in Morgantown, but I thought some of his stuff was kind of interesting, and so I wanted to go back and look at what he was saying at that time. So I put a few quotes. That's the opening of the book, End of Education. Of course, I'm blocking it, so let's scroll down there. As you can see, sorry, I'm working on my home computer without the double screens. As you can see, he gets into the whole idea of schooling versus education. That's what this quote is about. Um, he kind of feels like they're two different things. To give you, this is a very short, almost like thesis statement of what he's talking about in a lot of his books, especially End of Education. He's talking about this concept of schooling is what happens, what students don't like. Education is something that always happens. It has no bounds. Again, I've heard different incarnations of that statement, but that's what he's getting at. He also, this was not an End of Education, but probably his most famous book is Amusing Ourselves to Death. That is an older one. That's from like 84, 85. But he still had this, it's a very famous quote. It was technology is an ideology. And I have to say, I do fall into that a little bit. I do think we kind of worship at the altar sometimes of technology. And again, going back to that concept, just because we can do it, should we use it or should we do it or does it apply? Sometimes when we're using technology in the classroom and we're talking about the future, are we trying to fit a square peg into a round hole? That also, maybe it's just a week, but I don't know if you saw, I was thinking of Jurassic Park when he says, just because we can do something, should we do something? And then, of course, they've had the wolves, those dire wolves that were cloned this week. Uh, Check it out. It has nothing to do with the class, but I was just kind of that whole idea of just because you can do something or you have something, it doesn't mean you have to use it or have to always do it. And I think that's what he's kind of getting at with the technology as an ideology. I could be misinterpreting. That's just my viewpoint. Also, there's some other ones. At best, schooling can make about how to make life, which is quite different in how to make a living. That's where I think the heart of this is coming into. He's always talking about we're always worried about consumerism, making money, and that's what sometimes he feels like school is. You need to get a job, which these are important things, but sometimes it's about the narrative of how to function in society. Um, and that's what he's getting into with the idea of making a life instead of making a living. Um, but again, that's just my interpretation. Also, there was a whopper of a quote. It's a big, famous one. Actually, I think if you even type in, is it Brainy quotes? This one pops up a lot. But it's a long one, but it's kind of like the idea of public. By the way, he's not attacking public education in this statement. He's just talking about what kind of the flow out in terms of how we use it now. when he's talking about it does not serve the public, it creates a public. He's saying that's the importance of the role. I put and read some of the stuff. I'm going to read this part super quick. But in creating the right kind of public, the schools contribute towards strengthening the spiritual basis of the American creed. That is how Jefferson understood it. It's how Horace Mann understood it, of course, founder of public education, how Dewey understood it. And in fact, there's no other way to understand it. The question is not does or does not public schooling create a public? The question is what kind of public does it create? And that's where he's getting into. If you're into this, Postman's an interesting read, even if his books now are 30 years old. And, he kind of highlighted down here, but the right answer depends on two things and two things alone: the existence of shared narratives, that common experience, that relationship aspect, and the capacity of such narratives to provide an inspired reason for schooling. Like, why do you want to go to school? What is it going to do? What is it going to do to the public? And it's kind of funny. I laugh. This is the social studies teacher in me coming back. When I hear that American Creed, we talk about this in my methods class. Sorry to reference that multiple times, but it brings me back there. That idea is that even the idea of does that have a role with the patriotism? Like, if you ever notice, like on social studies books, there's always like American flags or Statue of Liberties and things like that. But then I got to thinking about Postman, and what's the idea of a textbook? Well, it is kind of learned, but those are companies, so they're trying to make money, and he gets into that. Maybe it's the commercialization of textbooks, because if you look at some of those textbooks, they'll have like Discovery Channel or History Channel on them, and those are businesses. So anyway, I'm going way down the rabbit hole here, and what I said, I would only spend a little bit of time. This stuff, though, is all posted if you want to check it out. I think it's very, very interesting. And I wish sometimes this is where I wish we were live so we could talk about this a little more. But with all that being said, the main thing you have to worry about, besides listening to me babble, sorry if I was talking a little quick, is your research paper. I have it due on April 22nd. And just to go over what's required, you have to write a 7 to 8 page research paper, double spaced 12-inch font, preferably Times New Roman, in current APA format. I don't have it posted. I will make sure to put Purdue OWL APA format on there if you need it. I have a feeling if you're in a graduate school at this point in education, I'm not familiar with APA format, but just in case, I will put the link up. And you can do a topic on anything of curriculum or pedagogy related topics. It's just got to be related to where you want to go with it. The work, that was a little bit of a mouthful, but basically pick a topic that interests you. The work should include a clear thesis position with different educational scholars on the topic. There should be at least 5 things in your bibliography, and reference them in your work. I threw a few up just in case you're going. The future of education to me is an interesting one, and like maybe some of those topics like the globalization or the the politics of education, which it's a very political field. Those things to me are very interesting, but there's other ones like straight up content related. The evolution of curriculum theory, curriculum and social justice, the role of assessment, the impact of technology, politics of curriculum, hidden curriculum, national versus local curriculum. That's very much in the news with the Department of Education. You could do something on the Department of Education and the role it fills in local schools. The role of arts. You can do the history of thought. You can do something on Socrates, Rousseau, Dewey, any of those guys. I'll put up a list of some of the old famous philosophers if you want to look at those. Different types of instructional approaches, student-centered learning. I'm not going to read the whole list word for word. These are just some. If you are not bound to this list, if there is something you would like to look at specifically in your field or in your grade level, that is fine. I know we have some that are doing higher ed that are in this class. If you want to look at something from a community college base, a technical college base, a university base thing, that is fine. Please. I want it to be a useful paper and something that you're looking at and that might have you, I guess, can benefit you out in your profession, kind of doing some research. So that's, I think that's the only assignment this week. And again, it's not due until the 22nd, which I believe is a Tuesday. Slowly, there we go. It is a Tuesday. So that way you'll have next week, then you got the weekend, and if you need a day or two. The reason I'm having it due on Tuesday, I need a little bit of time to read them, so I can get them posted for you. And then I'll have a video up next week, just kind of overviewing what we're going to do to wrap up. Next week is pretty easy. I'll be the first to admit. It's just going to be doing the TC. You have a self-assessment that you have to do, and then I might have a little survey type thing. But with that being said, thank you all very much, as always, for letting me ramble very quickly, kind of go over some things. Sorry, I always say 15 to 20 minutes, and then I look and it's like 27, 28. And I'm like, I hope I'm not talking too fast. I'm sure I am. And I'm babbling now. So I'm going to go ahead and say, I hope everyone's had a great week. I'm looking out my window. It was pouring rain. It looks like it's starting to stop. So hopefully everyone can get outside a little bit. I'd say enjoy the spring weather, but it doesn't seem like it's here right now. So again, have a good day, and I will talk to everyone next week. Bye.